So you're tracking with me in the process of buying a home, from preparation on into preparing offers and getting offers accepted, getting you under contract. In the first two videos, 1 and 2, this is the third video where we're going to cover the final process, including the inspection and appraisal and getting you toward closing and a culmination of the deal at the end and getting you the actual property to the point of you moving in or getting tenants in if you're investing in property. So either one, that's what we're going to cover today, because you don't know what you don't know, and I'm helping you understand what it's like to work with me and all the moving parts and processes as we are successful in acquiring property for you. So let's go. I connect with people just like you every day to help them discover where to live and invest in real estate and sell property for top dollar when the time is just right for them. My name is Leif Jacobson. I'm an ex-cop turned realtor, also known as Safe Leif. If you're new to this channel, subscribe so you're first to learn about Colorado real estate. My contact information is below. I'm excited to hear from you. Shoot me a text, call, or email after this video, or book a calendar item and a calendar event, and I will reach out to you, whatever works best. So today we're continuing and finishing up this 3-part series and culminating toward the closing process, which is what we all want, in successfully closing on the purchase of a house and or property for you. So the inspection process is what we're going to talk about next. The inspection process is a vital process where most people, it's really, technically, it's your inspection process for you to inspect the property and the surroundings, whether it's structures, whether it's the location, the neighborhood, any nuances inside and out of the property, and even where it's located and regionally where it's located. So you're inspecting the property top to bottom to make sure that you want to move forward in purchasing it and that there are no things that we can ascertain that would be red flags or barriers that would make it a not such a wise purchase for you. And one of the tools, because you and I only have such an educated eye, I'm pretty good at this and what I do. I'm very good at what I do, actually, but I'm not a building inspector. I'm not an engineer, and I don't have the educated eye in those areas to look for dozens or hundreds of nuances, just like you don't, that an inspector would be able to look for. So I strongly recommend that people hire professional inspectors to look at properties for a few $100s against a process that is going to cost you in the acquisition of the property many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. It is well worth a few $100s of your money, your hard-earned cash, in order to get it inspected by an inspector who's going to do the same thing, super linear, top to bottom, an assessment of the property, including the land itself, the grade and the landscaping, all the way up to the property, the structure, the structural components, the finished components on the outside, from siding and roofing, to the finished components on the inside, from flooring to walls and trim, as well as the components of the house, including the electrical components and plumbing components and HVAC and ducting, cooling, heating components, and all the other systems and appliances and other factors within the house. An inspection by a professional inspector should be a linear process where they're going through hundreds of items, from every light switch and light switch plate, all the way down to the appliances and all the systems and the structure that we're just talking about. It should be a pretty linear process where they're documenting throughout the inspection process with photos, and often really good inspectors do videos, which is super helpful on a report as well, a report that you get online after the fact. So you can not only see the text of their inspection, which is often can be a 15, 17, 25 page inspection, is lengthy, and it's nice to be able to reference lots of pictures and even videos for something specific that they're pointing out or a concern that they have. So they're looking at 3 different things throughout the inspection process in general. They're looking for minor things, kind of mid-range things, and or major or big red flags. That are things that are typically higher dollar amount as well. So the minor things, no property is maintained perfectly, and all properties have issues. I mean, all properties have issues. I can always find a number of things that could have been maintained better, or fixed or repaired, or systems that could have been maintained better. So there are minor things, and generally it's good to be aware of those. It's good to be what things you might need to pay attention to as you tweak up the property and make it just the way you want it, and put your sweat equity and dollars in to make sure that it's properly maintained, right? Because that affects the value of your property long term. So those minor things are typically not things throughout the inspection process. Once we come to the end and kind of go back to the seller, typically we don't bring small kind of trivial items forward. All houses and properties need to be maintained, and there's going to be a responsibility and some cash needed to do that for your part. So generally, you wouldn't like it as a seller to have a buyer come forward with 45 inspection items that are cut and pasted from their inspection of a property. So we don't want to do that coming forward with you as a buyer for property either. We don't want to be that guy or that gal coming forward in a way that we wouldn't want to be treated either. So it's good to go in eyes wide open. It's good to be aware of the issues as we go forward, but the minor things are pretty much for your information to know what you need to take care of as you're going to purchase and close on the property. The mid-range things could kind of go either way, depending on the dollar amount, depending on what they are, depending on your resources and availability to take care of those. Mid-range things and kind of, the mid-range, not necessarily safety items, but kind of more discretionary things is the way that the inspector is likely going to categorize those. Are things that should be taken care of. They're not urgent, they're not emergencies, and so they're good to do, but nothing that would be egregious or would cause alarm. The third level of things is kind of red level or red flag items that are or big ticket or safety items that really do need to be handled for the safety of the occupants and you as the owner. And also big ticket items, you may have, a foundation issue or something, structural that could be a $100,000, $150,000 issue. And you need to know about that in order to either move forward on the property with the right resources and negotiation, which is where I come in. Or you may choose, if something huge comes up like that, you may choose to not move forward on the purchase of the property. Inspectors have some general items that they're looking for, many general items they're looking for, but they also have a number of areas and other services that they'll provide that aren't necessarily included in the basic inspection. So just a heads up for that. Once they reach out to you, they can offer to test for things like asbestos and or mold testing if that's a concern, or if there's been some water damage. They can test for radon gas, which is an issue in Colorado and a couple other states. It's kind of location specific for those issues. Or a few other things like sewer scope. You're basically technically responsible for the sewer line in between your house and where it goes out to the street or the road and connects with if you're not on a rural property and you're connecting with a municipal sewer system versus a septic system is when you're kind of developing your own sewer system is really what that is on a rural property. So if you're connecting in with a municipal or a city sewer system, you're responsible for the connection in between your house and where it goes out to the streets typically and connects with the city or municipal sewer line. So those are additional services that you might have proposed to you. There's no obligation in those. I'm happy to talk about each of those. I won't cover those in this video, but I'm happy to talk about those individually with you if you have questions about what those are. So feel free to reach out in the comments after this video. I'm happy to engage with you on that. So there are two contingency components in the inspection process. One is inspection objections, and the other is inspection termination, as far as not moving forward with the contract. And those are two different things. So the inspection objection portion is when you have generally the house professionally inspected. Most people hire an inspector and come away with a report and a list of items like we talked about, major, medium, and not such big items. And come forward, and the inspection objection process is when you object to the seller coming forward saying, hey, we did our inspection, we're excited to buy this house. However, there's a number of things that came up that are either safety and or financial concerns that we aren't willing to live without or kind of mitigate ourselves. So we're asking you as the seller if you will take care of those. And that's asking, to be very clear, that's not a demand. This is all part of the negotiation process. And one kind of sub-negotiation that we do within the process is to come forward and ask kindly and respectfully if they're willing to address one or more of those items that we're bringing forward as an objection. We're objecting to say, hey, we want to move forward in good faith and buy this house, but we're needing help with these items. And the resolution of that can come in several forms. We can either ask them to take care of it themselves and provide proof that they've done that, or we can ask for a concession. We could say, hey, you don't need to do anything, but I'm going to need to do that in order to make it livable for myself or livable for a tenant if you're buying an investment property. And so we can ask for a concession saying, hey, seller, we're not asking you to do anything, but we're asking for a concession of a few $1,000s, whatever it is. It's usually kind of a moderate amount in that respect. Reference a credit that will come back to you and give you more resources in order to take care of those issues yourself. So that's the objection process, where we may go back and forth a few times. And again, the goal is a win-win. As I always work in real estate, it's not a win-lose, it's a win-win situation. We want you to be successful and get your needs met. We want it to be fair for you, and also we want it to be successful and the seller to get their needs met on the other side of the transaction, because that's good business and that's the most successful way to get real estate deals done, is a win-win for both parties. So we're looking to mitigate both people's needs. I'm representing you explicitly as your fiduciary in this transaction, and we're coming forward. And also, at the same time, we're simultaneously trying to meet the seller's needs and have it be a good faith deal for them as well, and get the maximum chance that they will accept any of your objections and be agreeable to either credit and or take care of some things there between both parties. It's strongly encouraged in this process to what I say is, we've all heard the term, not majoring in the minors. So we don't want to nitpick, and we don't want to nickel and dime on little items here. We're going to come forward with items that are substantial, that would be a substantial amount of money and be prohibitive as far as you as a buyer. So we want to come forward with a few things kind of at maximum, not a whole laundry list of things, but a few things that are the bigger ticket items that would cause you to back out and not purchase this property. So we want to come forward that way. And again, when you go to sell this property one day, you'll know what I'm talking about, because you'll appreciate a buyer who comes forward in good faith that way versus a bunch of little stuff. Nobody likes that. Let's cover a caveat real quick here, and that is a tool that's going to help mitigate the risk or your perceived risk as the buyer of a property. Once in a while, sellers will provide these, but it depends on the market we're coming into, is home warranties. So a home warranty is a service where you pay usually a few $100s to cover a property for a year or two. Typically, they don't go out more than 2 years, or typically they're 1 year at a time, but won't go out more than 2 years at a time. And that covers kind of the appliances, the major systems from HVAC, plumbing, and electrical, and a number of other components on the property that basically covers, it's like insurance. It's a few $100s for kind of a premium to the home warranty company, and it provides a warranty over time. We all know what a warranty is, and it warranties the systems and components of the house for that time frame. It costs a lot of money and a lot of cash in general, even if you're taking out a mortgage loan, even if you're putting zero down on a house as far as a mortgage loan, it still costs you a lot in closing costs and the incidental fees from inspections to appraisals and all the other components. You're spending a significant amount of cash, whether that's hundreds of thousands or whether that's a few thousand. You're spending a significant amount of cash acquiring this property, and it takes more cash if the moment you move in and that HVAC system goes out. I mean, those can be thousands, $6,000, $7,000, $9,000, $12,000 for an HVAC system. That's an unexpected thing. You can't always know. Even if you had a thorough inspection performed, you can't always know when those are going to go out, or even have a heads up for that. It's kind of like your vehicle. Like, did you predict the last major mechanical or electrical problem you had on your vehicle? Probably not so much. Some things you can forecast over time if you're maintaining it well and having a mechanic take a look at it consistently, but some things just happen. There's hundreds or thousands of components in mechanics and electronics in making a vehicle work, as well as a house work these days, especially these days with smart homes and all sorts of computerized stuff, just like cars. So all that is to say, home warranties are an option. They're a few $100s, and they mitigate your risk in having those components replaced, because if those then go down, or one of those systems has an issue within the time frame of your warranty period, then the warranty, sometimes there's a deductible, sometimes there's not, then the warranty company will take care of that issue rather than having your thousands of cash out of pocket to take care of whatever that thing was. So that's an option to consider. Obtaining homeowners insurance on the property is another contingency throughout the process, where you reach out, and I have great resources for you. So I can recommend, independent brokers as well as in-house insurance agents to provide options for you to get the house insured. You want to insure the house. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And so that's part of one of the contingencies that we will face during the contract process is making sure that the house is insurable. And there are different components to that in different areas and different risk factors in different areas. Like I also do business in Florida, and there's shore water and salt water and land law that has to do with shoreline and water acts and docks and other issues that are referenced being by the water. Obviously, that's not an issue in Colorado, so it just depends on your location. Reference making sure that a house is insurable. Maybe hail will be an issue in Colorado, or other kind of risk factors there. If you're on the West Coast, you have earthquakes to consider. So after we've moved past the inspection process and or have an agreement, reference inspection objections, we do a resolution document, which is where both parties agree, hey, we're willing to do this, not do this. Okay, we're moving past the inspection process. We then move toward initiating the appraisal process. So if you're buying cash, you may choose not to do an appraisal. And if you're confident and we've provided data to you, I can run analysis and provide data to you as far as the purchase price. But if you're not buying cash and you're utilizing a mortgage loan, chances are, if you're putting less than 50% down, sometimes 40%, if you're doing 10, 20, 3, 5, 10, 20, 30% down, typically the lender that's providing a mortgage loan would require you to have an appraisal performed. And that is a certified appraiser who is a person who is a valuator of property, and they know how to value property based on statistics of other properties within a certain time frame and within a certain radius, within very specific specs, give or take a few hundred square feet, and a number of bedrooms and a number of other accoutrements. They'll look at properties as far as we call those comps or comparable properties, and they are ascertaining that we are and confirming that we have offered a price for the property that is a justifiable sale price or value price for the property. So that is an opinion of value from an appraiser who's a third-party company. It's not somebody who works directly for the loan company or the lender. It's somebody who's brought in third party, an independent party, to verify whether the property is worth what we've offered. And so that process is subjective. We kind of wish that it was objective, but it really is a subjective process, because the bottom line is, just like inspectors, we can have appraisers, 10 appraisers appraise a property tomorrow, and generally every one of them will come up with a different dollar amount, because that's open to some interpretation and adjustments. Reference finishes of a property. It's one thing if a property has 40-year-old metal windows versus newer vinyl windows. If it has granite countertops versus 40-year-old laminate countertops, and whether it has that gorgeous green shag carpet that we all love from the 70s, or whether it has brand new carpet that was put in yesterday with high-grade pad and good dense carpet fibers and high-grade carpet. So all of those things and updates on the house are going to have a huge effect on its value. And that's what the appraiser is coming forward with, an opinion of their value of the property. And the intent of that is really because it's not in your best interest or the lender's best interest, and it's higher risk for them to lend you money on a property higher than the dollar amount of the value of the property, meaning you're underwater. You've probably heard that term, meaning you owe more on a property than it's worth the moment you buy it. Generally, that's not in your best interest, and I would agree with that. And so most lenders require appraisals for that amount if you're not putting in a certain dollar amount. If you're putting in over a certain dollar amount, then they've covered themselves, because they're not lending more than a property is worth, because you're putting down a huge amount of cash. So usually that's required as far as the appraisal. And on the completion of the appraisal, if that appraisal happens to come in at a lower dollar amount than the house is worth, it doesn't necessarily mean that the deal is done or dead. It means we're going back into, that's one of the contingencies, and we go back to negotiating, just like the other processes. Doesn't mean that the property's bad necessarily. It just means that we may need to tweak the terms a little bit in order to have it kind of mitigate your risk and make it an appropriate purchase for you and make it work with the lender as far as as the loan. So we go back to the drawing table there a little bit. It's all full disclosure. There's no smoke and mirrors. We bring forward that appraisal that we've paid for through your lender, and we say, hey, look, the property appraised for this. We have a number of options there. We can negotiate with the seller saying, hey, will you split the difference with us? Will you cover the difference in purchase price and reduce the price basically so you can purchase the property? Will you split a difference if you want it that bad? And depending on where we feel like the value is, we may agree or not agree with the value and the opinion of the appraiser. So I have access to all the same data generally that the appraisers do through the multiple listing service, the MLS. They're looking at past purchases, what people have purchased property for. So we can look up those same things and we can kind of mitigate that data and that information ourselves as well. So we may not agree with that and we may actually appeal that. That's one of the other options as well. We can go back to the appraisal company through the lender and say, look, we don't agree with that. Here's 3 other sales that maybe you missed or you weren't, or you were using different comparative data or terms. And so we can negotiate and mitigate that a little bit to see if we can bump up the value of that appraisal. Sometimes, I've had appraisers that do things that are kind of crazy in the industry and are not part of their job, like their opinion of the economy or the market. I've had appraisers say, I'm just going to appraise this house $40,000 less because I don't trust the economy and I think it's another bubble house boom and I just don't trust the economic status of that. And everybody thinks, what are you talking about? Like that's not even your job. We're not paying you as an economist. We're paying you as an appraiser to look at the raw data. So sometimes it's necessary to make an appeal, to appeal the price that an appraiser has come across with. So the bottom line is we're not dead in the water there necessarily. We have appeals and processes we can go through to kind of move that forward, and it may culminate to the point of us hitting a wall and saying, hey, this isn't going to work, or it's not going to work for the lender, or it's not appropriate for you to move forward with the purchase, or we can win and be successful, which happens a lot of the time as well, where we can say, hey, we're appealing this. Here's 3 other properties you might have missed or not taken a look at respectfully. And they might look at those and say, you're right. We're actually going to consider those comps and we'll bump up the value here a little bit. So again, the goal is to look at the 40,000 foot view at the big picture and make sure it is an equitable deal for you and in your best interest as the purchaser of the property. So those are some of the additional parts and components that are happening kind of in the background, and there's lots of other people, dozens of other people that are involved that you don't even need to know about, who are working on the components in order to get this to move toward a successful culmination as far as an acquisition of property for you in the end. So as we move toward closing, there's lots of components that come into play, and one of those is the closing day. So buyers of property who are utilizing a mortgage loan or mortgage company, typically it's been 30 or 40, 45 days or so is what it takes for the typical mortgage company to come forward and successfully close a loan on a property. And that comes down to closing day, and the mortgage company typically requires that the buyer sign all the documentation and the documents on the day of closing. It can't be done before. Sellers of property don't have to sign on the day of closing. They can usually sign a week or 2 ahead of time to sell the property, and they can be done with their few signatures. It's only a handful of signatures to sell a home. It's a very simple process in comparison. To sell a home versus buying a home, mainly because of the mortgage documents, requires dozens and dozens of signatures and can take about an hour, versus selling a home takes about 10 minutes and a few signatures. So super simple process on the sales side. So when you go to sell it one day with me and we get you top dollar for the same house and you're moving on and doing something different one day, it's super fast and easier to sell it than it is to buy it, and I'll line up all those components. So you'll receive lots of documentation throughout that month or so process as we move toward closing, including the settlement statement. For both sides, there's the seller's settlement statement and the buyer's settlement statement. Both of those spell out, hey, here's what you're paying in, here's what you're receiving as far as financially, kind of like a profit or loss or a balance statement. In a business, that's what's happening as you purchase this property. So the goal is, if everyone's done their job well and the components that we can control and the preparation and intentionality that we're moving toward, there's no smoke and mirrors, and everyone has a good picture and there are no surprises on closing day for either party. Reference who pays what and what expectations are fulfilled and how the culmination of the deal comes together, and then how the deed is transferred. So the title is transferred through a document that's called the deed, which is what transfers that into the title into your name or your entity name, however you are purchasing the property. And that typically is submitted right upon mutual execution of the closing process. And when we have everyone's signatures, the title company who's typically emceeing the transaction will then make sure that's submitted, literally within minutes or an hour or two. They're submitting that deed and moving forward on the transfer of that property. So typically you would walk away with keys or access to the property coming away from the closing table, depending on making sure that the seller has signed before you. Buyers are typically the last ones to sign and move forward in that process afterwards. So you'll kind of literally or typically own the property within an hour or two. You can head right from the closing table typically to the property and have access to it as long as the funding has gone through and the seller has been paid. They want that check in their hands or in their account by the time that you are granted access to the property, of course, as they should. So while closing day marks the culmination of this transaction, it does not, in my opinion, and from my perspective, mark the culmination of our relationship. This is just the beginning of me being a lifetime resource for you. I pride myself on being super relational and following up well and being an ongoing resource for my clients. So for a lot of realtors who are transactional and it's just all about the transaction, you'll never hear from them again after the closing day. That is not who I am. It's not how I roll. I'm very relational and connective. And the goal is for me to I want to do business with your children, right? So I want to be a long-term resource with you as far as a realtor. And I want to be your all things real estate or anything else in life. I want to be the guy and have a relationship and a friendship with you even after the fact. So I'm the guy that you reach out to if you need resources, reference your house, or any upkeep or maintenance or issues, or even in life, and have a friendship and go out to dinner or lunch after the fact and stay in touch. And I'd love to be relational in that way. So thanks for hanging in there with these 3 videos where we talk about the buying process from preparation all the way through getting under contract and then closing the deal, culminating for your best interest, for your benefit, to meet your needs, goals, and priorities in the end. Please let me know. This is a high view little video series here, and we haven't covered even close to every component. There's dozens and dozens of other components that we'd cover, but this is just kind of the 30,000 foot view covering the major components of a transaction, and hopefully it's been helpful to help you understand what it's like to work with me and how we can move you toward a successful closing on property every time. Shoot me a text, call, or email after this video. Book a calendar event and or comment below. I'd love to see and hear your comments, reference other components that you'd like to engage with, other videos that you'd like to see, and other topics that you'd like to see covered. I'd love to do that. And I don't want to just put out things that I think are important. I want to do what you want to hear and what are important to you. So help me understand what those are. I'm excited to see you on the next video. See you soon.